Hello, welcome to the Yoga for the Creative Soul Book Club gathering today as we're carrying through chapter 7, applying yoga's systematic approach to connecting to our creative self. It is a system of connecting to the true self, and our creative inspiration is coming from that divine force of creation. So here as we play with Raja Yoga, the eightfold path, as described in the Yoga Sutras, we're applying these 8 limbs to our creative inspiration and our creative output. We've spoken already about the first 3 limbs. The first 2 are ethical principles. They guide us in our lifestyle, and we come back around to them as we continue our journey. We gain insights through these other realms and practices that we'll talk about in upcoming weeks, and are continually coming back to the yamas, the restraints of harm, and the niyamas, the observances of health and purity. The third limb is asana, which the Yoga Sutras define as a steady, comfortable seat. But it ultimately, if we, every time you read a sutra, and you can work on just the same one sutra your entire life and revisit it and get a deeper meaning every time. So asana is a steady, comfortable seat. This idea that much is required in order to maintain comfort in the body, and this becomes ever more true as the body is on this planet subject to the forces of stress and emotions, of gravity, of wear and tear. And I think wear and tear covers it. So we care for the body. So asana isn't just like these poses, these formal poses in the 5,000-year tradition of yoga arising in India. Asana as pose is quite a new concept, actually, that in its tradition is more about hygiene of the body, nutrition. What are we taking in through the senses, which we'll talk more about in the next couple of weeks? How are we ingesting and digesting? The effect of our thoughts on our physical selves. And yes, movement is important, countering our everyday actions. So back in 5,000 years ago, there were the chores of running the ashram or the monastery. There was working the fields, certain repetitive tasks that the body was subject to back then, and movements to counter those. And now, I forget where I heard this, but something about how the more you sit in a chair, the more we wind up shaped like chairs. So we need to counter all the sitting that we're doing. That's the one of the modern banes of health, is being seated continually. So just to broaden your view on asana there, third limb, and the fourth limb is pranayama, the life force. So we'll take a look at this. Last week we played with I think we only played with the breath as 3 phases of breath, plus some approaches to witnessing and just doing self-portraiture from that. So if you missed last week, head over to YouTube or the Facebook group and engage with that previous one, which is kind of a fun journey. It's open, and yet there is potentially much revealed from it. Before we get going on today's topic, I wish to acknowledge my privilege as a settler to live here rent-free on the lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishnawbe, and the neutral people. Right nearby the area of the one dish with one spoon wampum agreement that brought peace to these lands, and to encourage you to look into whose lands you are inhabiting, what treaties have been affected in those lands, and in what ways is there adherence to those treaties? Where I am adjacent to the Grand, 5% of the lands promised to the people are actually in their ownership. 95% promised to them, not given to them. So just ways that we can engage our yoga to support unity is following those action items that are arising from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I just was listening to CBC last week, Tom Allen, as I do, love myself some Tom Allen DJing. And he's doing a show now called It's About Time, where he acknowledges one of the action items in each show. I thought that was pretty brilliant. Yes. So while we're talking about these more sensitive topics, it's a chance for you to notice your breath. How are you breathing just right now? Don't change anything. And of course, as soon as we notice the breath, it changes. That is the nature of our system, is when we start to pay attention to something, it instantly responds to that attention. And that's one of the reasons it's so important for us to check in with our breath throughout the day, that when we check in, it shifts itself in the direction of health. But if we're not conscious of our breath, we can go all day, days, weeks, months, even years, without a connection to the messages that are being carried in the energy of the breath, the potential to increase health by changing our breathing practice. And so now, as we go into the teaching component of the workshop today, I encourage you to elongate the breath a bit more. We played with this last week. Puraka, prolonging the inhale, Richaka, prolonging the exhale, and noticing that there tends to be a lot of space in the volume of the lungs that we don't use unless we bring conscious attention to it. So I encourage you to stretch those lungs from the inside. Those of you who've been playing with breath for quite some time can tune into other diaphragms beyond the respiratory diaphragm. You can do what is called the jellyfish breath. Very, very easy to find this online at this stage, but where we're moving the pelvic diaphragm with the respiratory diaphragm. You can think about what diaphragms are acting in the area of the throat, in the occipits, around the back of the pelvic diaphragm where the thighs meet the seat, or perhaps even the arches of the feet, or the soft spot at the top of the head. So there's lots of ways that we can play with mobilizing the subtle energies via the breath. And this is the idea of the breath work. In yoga, we understand that that the breath is the animating force. So the life force of our being is carried on the breath. And if you limit your breath, a moment ago where I asked you to check in, if you'd noticed that your breath was more rapid, more shallow, you might have also felt more stress. Breath is the bridge in the koshas model, in the layers of being model. Breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. And if the breath isn't flowing fully, that creates an autonomic stress. The nervous system feels stressed because it's not getting its slow, deep breaths. It's getting a bit more of a stressed out and a panic breath. The bridge between the body and the mind, where the mind is responsive to a rapid, shallow breath as well. The thoughts, the speed of thought, the activity of thought tends to mirror the breath. So if the breath is rapid, the thoughts tend to be speedy as well. If the breath is shallow, the thoughts tend to be surface thoughts as well, not things that are deeply important to us, not things that will matter 15 years from now or on our deathbeds, but day-to-day concerns that we really get captivated by. And when we slow and deepen that breath, so again, you can bring yourself back to that even now, slowing the breath, deepening the breath. That tells the nervous system that we're safe. That tells the nervous system all is well. So the body and the life force being carried through the body calms with that deep breath. And the thoughts slow as well. There is more space between the thoughts. That train of thought doesn't race off too quickly in various directions. It's better able to stay centered. And we can be more responsive to our thoughts and feelings when the breath is deeper. We're taking in more life energy. So in yoga, this is called pranayama or pranayama, prana, life force, and yama, to control or restrain, or ayama, to extend or prolong. So you'll find disputes out there. Is it prana and ayama or prana and yama? And my deep dives haven't led me to anything conclusive. So I teach both ways, and you can see how both apply. If we are prolonging, extending the life force, then we are, in a sense, prolonging and extending health, prolonging and extending life. So again, reminding you even now to be deepening that breath, extending the inhales, extending the exhales. And the more we practice this, the more our set point shifts so that the breath remains deep even if we're not watching it. And what is our version of a shallow breath also changes, where in the beginning, people taking a shallow breath will be about 1 count in, 1 count out. It's quick, but I see it. In my psychotherapy practice, I say, let's take a few deep breaths and count them. And we'll see 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out as the deep breath version. Because that is so stressed, very much outside of a healthy set point, it doesn't take long to turn into 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, which is getting closer to a neutral breath. But if you're practicing pranayama at home and you're 16 seconds in, say 16 seconds out, then to wind up not paying attention to it and be 8 seconds in, 8 seconds out, do you see how much more ahead of the game you are? How much opportunity there is to prolong life through that deeper breath. So as I'm continuing to teach, I'm setting you to your creative expression now. While we're talking about extending the life force, extending health, I ask that you in some way depict that, in some way depict the relationship between your smooth, deep, comfortable, healthy breaths and your physical and mental health. You can draw that in stick figures, in swirls of color. You can write a descriptive paragraph. You can move it around the room. Just feel it in a dancey or movement-based kind of way. But give yourself the chance to express that vitality, that life force that you are prolonging, extending with these deep breaths. A benefit for our creative selves with the deep breath is that as that train of thought is slowing down or becoming more focused, the busyness of mind that disrupts our inspiration, that makes us feel bereft, that makes our creative well seem empty, is refilled, is centered, is open, so that inspiration can flow through. When the breath is calm, telling the body, the nervous system, that it can also be calm. When the breath is calm so that the mind has capacity, then inspiration is much more naturally present. And even in the times where we wish to create, but there doesn't seem to be anything there for us, this breath can set the stage. So if we then decide we're just going to scribble or doodle because we don't know, we're not inspired to a specific subject, or we're going to just free write because we know we want to write but don't seem to have anything to say, that breath has set the stage for a little bit of scribbling to turn into a visual piece, a little bit of free writing to turn into a focused description or dialogue. So the breath is a supportive tool for health overall, also very much a supportive tool for our mental emotional stability and for our creative process. And a very recent study published in 2022 by Pant, Frischkopf, and some of their research friends studied post-traumatic stress after being in the intensive care unit. And they were looking at many different aspects of that post-traumatic stress. And what we know about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic stress recovery is that it is very much an autonomic recovery process. The nervous system and the body are necessary players in this recovery, and very much a neurological journey as well. The size and shape of certain areas of the brain are relevant in how much trauma we are experiencing or how much we have integrated and moved beyond that traumatic stress. And in this study, they're acknowledging and looking at the role of listening to music and playing music post-ICU traumatic stress. And in the study, they're acknowledging that that music stimulates neurogenesis. In other words, this is a fancy word, right? Sounds kind of cool. Neurogenesis. It means building the brain. Music stimulates the building of brain tissues, of neuronal connections. Neuroplasticity encourages changing the size and shape of the brain in the direction of recovery, enhancing brain recovery overall, as well as normalizing the stress response. Some of what freaks us out, if I can say it that way, in traumatic stress is that those intrusive symptoms are so intense that it throws us off balance. It makes us think we're truly losing it. And in fact, hallucination is an aspect of post-traumatic stress. It's not coming from the same place as a schizophrenic hallucination. It is because of dissociation, because of the effect of trauma on the brain. So we feel like, oh boy, I'm losing my grip on reality. Well, kind of, but that's what intrusive symptoms do. It's fixable. Not that anyone is broken, but this symptom that we don't want to wish to live with can go away. And what this study is talking about is how just listening to music supports that in happening, normalizes a stress response so that we don't go too much into, oh no, it's going to be like this forever. Something's really wrong with me. I'll never be the same again. All of those post-traumatic thoughts, feelings, belief systems that are actually not the truth. So music helps us adapt to that. What the study showed is that it improved overall coping and emotional regulation, decreased symptoms of dissociation, which is amazing that we can stay present. And in fact, in that presence, let those symptoms of the traumatic stress move through our awareness without being swept away by them. That, by definition, is post-traumatic stress recovery. Reducing depression and anxiety levels and the overall severity of all those symptoms. So you can jot down the link that I did include in the slide to this study, and the full article is available through PubMed. You just look over on the right hand side and it'll say full PMC article, and you click on that, you can read the entire study. Or just go to Google Scholar and search Pant Frischkopf 2022 music PTSD ICU. For sure, with that many search terms, you're going to get that study if you're into that kind of thing. Now, that was a lot of talk about traumatic stress, mental health, physical health, and the breath. And you were creating at the same time as we were talking about all of that. So likely that influenced what came through in the creation. This would be a highly personal, expressive work. So of course, understanding if everyone in the group would want to pass on this. But if there is anything anybody wanted to share for the benefit of those watching the video or the benefit of those who are on the recording right now. Yeah, hi, Karen.
Hi, Erin. So I enjoyed, the Paraka Rishaka so much last week. It kind of brought that back to me. And I've been practicing it in like non-traditional places, like when I'm driving, to keep my mind focused and stay calm and all that kind of stuff. So today when I was doing it, I felt like this expansion, like this would be like the intercostal, I guess, muscles between the ribs and the ribs expanding. I got that image when you were talking about it. And it just became like a butterfly representing a transformation. So that was my physical sensation. And then this is my mind opening up, just opening up and being clear and light, and the connection between mind and body.
Beautiful. Thanks, Karen.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. Hi, Donna.
This is really basic. So for people like me, this is my shallow breath. That's how I feel. Like short, short, short. And then this one, the one below it, it starts here on mine. It's going up and down, but then it starts to really open up more and more and more. So very simple.
Thanks for sharing that. It takes me back to that study. So the study focused on music. However, if we went in and just kind of did that activity like Donna demonstrated there, where we draw the breath and we measured those same measures as what they were discussing in that study, we would see very similar outcomes. That any kind of expressive engagement is creating that neurogenesis, is allowing that affect regulation. And Donna, if you hold up your slowing breath version again, you can see how across time she's depicting the waves are getting deeper and there's more space between them. And when we feel ourselves draw that, thank you, Donna. When we feel ourselves draw that, and when we see what we're feeling reflected back to us, that loop of experiencing it, expressing it, and then seeing or hearing or feeling the expression, that loop enhances the overall healing that is coming from the expressive activity. So, and further to Donna's point, it doesn't have to be a big deal. It is about the act of expression, not the final output. So thank you both very much for, and I love, this is some of why I get you to share on the video is how different everybody is. It's really important that we let this expression be our own. So thank you for that. Yes. Next week, when we gather, we're going to play with an activity to follow the breath to set the stage for inspiration itself. So today we used music as an example, but we looked at how engaging with the energy of something creative, like the sound of music or creating music, can support our overall mental health. And next week, we'll play a little bit with harnessing that power. We'll play with inspiration. And if you want to read ahead a little bit, that activity is on page 105. In fact, what we will have been doing for 3 weeks there would be hanging out on page 105 and really getting to know the energy of creativity and the effect of breath on this journey, on our expressive journey, on our journey to the self. As we're thinking of energy, I'm running a course through approaching the solstice here in 2022 to the week following the summer solstice about protecting our energy and understanding how energy drains happen. So if anyone is interested in participating in that entire course or just week by week wants to look at mental energetic health, reach out to me about that or go to erinbyron.com/empathic-security. A lot of the work I do one-on-one with clients is supporting that energetic protection and fortitude, especially if we've survived trauma. It can be really tough to navigate those more subtle boundaries. So all of that plays into the role of prana and pranayama in our practice. Was there anything anybody else wanted to say or share before we close out the recording for the day? Thank you very much for your attendance, and be sure to share to the group. Share the YouTube video with anybody that you think might benefit, and I look forward to seeing you next week.